New York is famous for a lot of things: taxis, bagels, fire escapes, skyscrapers, street art, and people who are unique. But it's most famous for its landmark places, and I'm convinced New York City has more recognizable locations than anywhere else in the world, many more. But which are the best, the most famous? To see, I ranked them. The list is not scientific, but I've led many tourists on walks throughout the city, and here I've ordered 100 New York spots based on how famous they are to non New Yorkers. So, how often do they come up on visitors' itineraries, for example? I've also thrown a little bit of my personal preference into the mix. So, let's count them down from some slightly famous spots to the real showstoppers. And by the way, for this video, I made sure I had visited all of these, so every photo you see was taken by me. Let's go. How many landmarks do you know? So we're starting off here with a fun one. I thought it made sense to sort of give an overview of New York with this panorama of the city of New York, which is located in the Queens Museum. It's this amazingly detailed, down to every single building, replica of New York, and it was originally in the 1964 World's Fair, and it's just incredible to visit. You can walk around it, you can walk above it, you can see my shoes sticking out on top of the land. It's just really incredible to visit. Next, we have the Plaza Hotel, definitely one of the most famous hotels in the city. Beautiful, beautiful building overlooking Central Park. Famous for Eloise from the book, the little girl that lives in the plaza, and for where the Beatles stayed when they were in New York. Just this gorgeous building. Next up, this is kind of an obscure one, but I recognize it immediately from my history textbook, having learned in high school. This is Tammany Hall, which, if you did learn about it in American history class, you might not have realized is an actual building which is located in Union Square. And Tammany Hall was the political institution that sort of ruled the city in a lot of ways in the early 20th century, but became known for intense corruption. Their building still stands and was recently renovated with a turtle shell roof to honor the Native American experience that where Tammany comes from. Next up is Wave Hill, which is located way up north in the Bronx. It's this estate that overlooks the Hudson River and looks out to the Palisades of New Jersey. And it's just this gorgeous botanical estate with a mansion that is now a cultural center for art exhibits and things. And it's a really beautiful place to visit. Astor Place. This is one that not a lot of non-New Yorkers know about, but is memorable, particularly for its cube, which is a sculpture called Alamo by Tony Rosenthal from 1967. It was originally placed there temporarily, but everyone loved it and they kept it. You can spin it around, as you can see here, my daughter attempting, but it's actually pretty difficult. Next, we have the Fearless Girl statue. And you can see here pictures of where it was originally installed, facing the famous Charging Bull statue. It sort of seemed to be in defiance of the bull. But later it was moved to across from the stock exchange, and it's still there. And it was very, very popular and famous when it first popped up. Actually part of a marketing stunt, but it stuck and became sort of symbolic of both the little person sticking up for things and also a strong feminism message. Next up is Nathan's Famous. You know it's famous when it just says famous. These are hot dogs located in Coney Island, located throughout the city, but the famous one, the original, and it says it, the original, really big on the wall, is a Coney Island. And they have good hot dogs. What can I say? It's also home to the famous hot dog eating contest where people eat over 50 hot dogs at a time, which sounds wonderful. Next is the Cloisters. The Cloisters is a monastery, sort of a recreated monastery using a lot of authentic pieces of medieval art as a museum that's part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, located up in Fort Tryon Park. And it's just an amazing exhibit of medieval art to see all the artwork, both in and of itself and also in this authentically medieval environment. Next, we have Greenwood Cemetery, which is sort of a tourist destination in and of itself for its beautiful architecture, its beautiful view of the city, its sculptures, its mausoleums, its crypts and buildings and headstones, and just a really remarkable place with a lot of really interesting architecture. And the main gate is this huge Gothic construction, and it's beautiful. But also, a weird fact about the top is that these green parrots live at the top. There's a story that they allegedly escaped from an illegal pet trade, and there's now a whole colony that's been there for decades of green parrots that live in Greenwood Cemetery. Here we have the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. It's actually started in 1892 but never finished. And even though it's never finished, it's still one of the largest cathedrals, I think, in the United States or in the world. And it's got this beautiful statue as well called Peace Fountain. It's a very cool spot. Now we come to Federal Hall, downtown, right across from the Stock Exchange. This building, which is not actually the original building, but is still pretty old, was the original government of the United States. The capital used to be New York before it was Washington, D.C. And now it's a museum, and there's a nice statue of George Washington outside. Of course, it's under construction in these pictures, but what are you going to do? It's New York, so there's scaffolding. Now we've got our first neighborhood on the list. There's going to be several because they are tourist destinations themselves. And this one is Williamsburg. And Williamsburg is just known as being a very cool and trendy place right now with a lot of nice shops, a lot of nice street art, restaurants, places to shop. It's got a beautiful park that looks out across the river. Just a nice place to walk around, do some shopping. There's a really cool store called Mother of Junk, and bookstores and other places to look at. This one on the list kind of drives me crazy. It really intrigues me. It's this clock by Tiffany's. Is right outside the Flatiron building, right by the Lego store. Totally nondescript. No one notices it when they're walking by. It's nice looking and all. But I can't for the life of me fathom why it's a landmark when no one knows about it or talks about it, but it always shows up in things. Like, here's this bag, and it's one of only a couple of New York things. It's always in photos. It's often paired with the Flatiron building. But it's considered this famous landmark, but no one knows about it or talks about it. It's really interestingly bizarre. Here we have FAO Schwartz, which is a toy store. That's about it. It's a very cool toy store. It's crowded. It was in the movie Big, which is how it got famous. It's been in a couple locations. Now it's in Rockefeller Center. And it has people outside dressed like this. Next, we have the Waldorf Astoria, which is another really famous hotel. You know it's famous when they name a Muppet after you. And when I visited, it was under construction. Unfortunately, it's undergoing a major renovation, but it's a very famous and prestigious hotel. Here we have a popular spot, the Friends apartment. What's weird about this is it's not really the Friends apartment. It's just the exterior of the building that they use to show the exterior. The entire show itself was shot in studios, not in New York, because they were very unrealistic New York apartments. But this spot attracts a lot of people just to take a picture of this building. It is above a coffee shop or a little store here that's called the Little Owl. So we took a picture with my daughter's little owl. Here we have the Whitney Museum. Really nice museum in a new spot. I remember the old building that was pretty ugly. This one is next to the High Line in the Meatpacking District. Looks out over the High Line in the city at night, which is nice. Has a lot of contemporary American art, modern American art from the 20th, 21st centuries. Another great museum to visit is the Brooklyn Museum. An eclectic mixture of things. Great place to go. Just a really nice museum that has a little bit of everything in terms of art. Here's Freeman Alley, and this is a place I take tourists all the time. It's one of my favorite spots in the city. It is an alley decorated unbelievably with a million pieces of street art and sort of street paraphernalia of stickers and posters and flyers and text and poems and political statements and artwork and all of this interesting graffiti. And it's this really, really cool spot. And every time you visit, it looks like something different. Another museum on the list is the Museum of the American Indian. This place is in the old Customs House, which is this incredible building. It's just stunning with this rotunda. It has these statues outside representing the continents that are just really, really cool. And it's a really nice museum to walk around and learn about the history of the American Indian. Chelsea Market is a spot where I used to eat lunch all the time when I worked near there, and I'm surprised how many tourists put it on their list to visit. It is a cool spot. It's pretty crowded, but it's a nice sort of food market and some other shops with a lot of boutique types of foods and desserts and different things, and it's a cool industrial space to walk around. Here we have Soho, another neighborhood, stands for south of Houston Street, but is, of course, also sort of an homage to London's famous Soho. It's known for its cast iron buildings, which are just gorgeous. Fire escapes, the columns, the filigree, the architecture, the detail on there is just gorgeous. And this used to be this sort of center of the art world and has now gentrified into very, very trendy shopping. 8th Street is known as St. Mark's Place between Astor Place and Alphabet City. And it's known historically as sort of a counterculture street, specializing in a lot of different bars and restaurants and nightlife and fun shops of vintage clothes and tattoos and all sorts of interesting, fun things. Just a neat street to walk around. People are always saying that it's gentrified too much and it's lost its character. It still has some character, even with Gem Spa gone, unfortunately. Next on the list is the Louis Armstrong House. This is a house in Queens that they've preserved perfectly the way that jazz legend Louis Armstrong had it decorated and furnished when he lived here with his wife. First of all, it's just cool to see how they lived and preserved from the 50s and 60s. With some really eclectic design. You're not allowed to take pictures inside it, unfortunately. But he also has a lot of artwork of himself that's been given to him over the years, and that was cool to see as well. Trinity Church downtown is very famous. It was briefly the tallest building in the world. It has this stained glass window that's just stunning. In this photo, actually, you can see it compared to both the Woolworth building and the One World Trade, which we'll get to, but a lot of landmarks in this photo. It's just a beautiful spot to visit. It has a graveyard in the back that includes Alexander Hamilton, who you may know from that play he was in. Next, we have Grant's Tomb. This is kind of a big deal, sort of just tucked away next to Riverside Park, and is gigantic. This huge mausoleum, I guess, that's a National Historic Site. One weird thing is that there's a piece of art stretching around the back of it that is this sort of children's tile bench that looks like Park Güell in Barcelona. It's really weird and completely contrasts with Grant's Tomb. So it's just really interesting that it's there. Here we have the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Very cool spot, gorgeous. The flowers, the foliage, it's just really beautiful. They have a couple unique things. They're known for their Cherry Blossom Festival. They have these biomes inside, like rainforest and desert. That's very cool. It's just a really beautiful spot. Next is the Diamond District. Almost all diamonds in the United States come through this one little stretch of 47th Street. It's very cool. It has these big pylons on the ends of the street with diamonds showing on them. And one little known fact that's kind of cool is that the sidewalk on this whole block is filled with little diamond flecks, presumably not from real diamonds, but they sparkle when you walk on the sidewalk. This is one I don't know too much about. It's the Edge, but it is popular with tourists. Of the tall buildings you can go up in New York, it has, I think, the highest outdoor ledge that you can go on in the city, in the US, in the world. Not for me. Not my thing. The Woolworth building is just an architectural marvel with this sort of neo-Gothic, beautiful detail and construction. It was, as were several items on this list, once the tallest building in the world for a very brief time, I believe, until the Chrysler Building and then the Empire State Building surpassed it. Columbus Circle is pretty well known. There's a globe here that echoes the Unisphere, which we'll see shortly. They had a very cool art exhibit in which you could climb up the stairs to see the Columbus statue that's in the center of the circle. And they had it dressed up inside like a living room, which is very interesting. Here you can see my wife looking down from it across the circle. Here we have two famous courthouses, the New York County Supreme Court and the Thurgood Marshall United States Courthouse. Super famous for the steps, mainly. You see them in Law and Order, you see them in countless TV shows and movies when there is legal drama unfolding. And I've been inside these buildings several times, and I'm not under arrest. Beautiful buildings, confusing to walk around, and very, very majestic and really imposing. Snug Harbor is a real standout of Staten Island. It's a sort of cultural center that includes a number of buildings, museums, botanic garden, just a number of different things put together that is really remarkable and beautiful to walk around. Tudor City is kind of tucked away up near the UN and is sort of an architectural marvel where they built this entire neighborhood with a similar Tudor Revival architecture style. It's a quiet place with this park and a bridge overlooking 42nd Street. It's just a beautiful, quiet place to go. Madison Square Garden is very well known, one of the premier stadiums in the world. The only time I've been inside here was for a video gaming competition in which coworkers took me, but it was very interesting. I had no idea what was going on, but it was very cool. Dumbo is another neighborhood on the list, and sometimes tourists are surprised to find out it actually stands for something absurd, which is down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass. It's a stretch, but it's a really cool neighborhood to walk around, very trendy, lots of little galleries and stores, and a lot of tech companies centered in that area. Also known for Brooklyn Bridge Park, and you can see in the street art some elephant motifs. Union Square is one of my favorite places in the city. We live near there. It's just sort of a gathering place for young people, for protesters, for students, for chess players. It's known for two particular markets. One is a green market, the oldest in the city. It's been around for decades, that happens several times a week with a farmer's market and art on display. And the other is the holiday market, which is well known enough to be mentioned on the Hawkeye TV show. Columbia University. This is the only picture I have of Columbia University that I've taken. I don't get up there very much, but of course it's one of the most prestigious universities in the country and is located uptown. The New York Botanical Garden is in the Bronx and is an incredibly well-known garden, known for their train show that they have every year, art exhibits, just beautiful stuff, really diverse range of displays. This is a relatively new one called Little Island, but it has quickly become enormously popular and enormously crowded. It is very, very cool. It is an island that they built completely human-made, and you can walk up and down these beautiful hills and get a snack, and there's a theater, and it's just really nice views of the river and the city, and it's a cool place to walk around and see. The Tenement Museum on the Lower East Side is very, very cool. It's a testament to New York's rich history of immigrants and different ethnic enclaves and neighborhoods that helped different cultures immigrate to the United States. And you can take one of their tours through classic buildings and neighborhoods to see how people lived at different decades throughout the centuries. Governor's Island is really one of a kind, really standout place. It is a whole separate island south of Manhattan that was a military base, but was given to the city and turned into a park. And it's a whole recreation center. And just recently, in the past few years, they turned the southern half of the island into what's called the Hills, that you can climb up and get these beautiful views, this vista of the whole harbor. Here we have the statue of Atlas, a very famous piece of art located in Rockefeller Center, well known partly because it was on one of Ayn Rand's books and became associated with Atlas Shrugged and with that movement, for better or for worse. For worse. Carnegie Hall, another on the list of buildings that was under construction when I visited to take pictures, but a well known place. I have some friends who have performed there in groups. It's a beautiful theater with a rich, rich history. Here's the Vessel, another relatively new addition to New York in the past decade. I've climbed up to the top of it. Again, climbing up to the top of very tall things is not my absolute favorite thing to do, but it did look very cool and result in some very cool pictures over in the new neighborhood of Hudson Yards. St. Patrick's Cathedral is very impressive on Fifth Avenue. It's right across from Rockefeller Center. Here's a shot of it I was able to take from inside one of the Rockefeller Center buildings. And it's just beautifully designed, just a really nice landmark. Next, we have the Ghostbusters Firehouse, probably the most well-known landmark in the Tribeca area. This is just very, very cool to see, and it looks exactly as it did in the movies. You can look inside, you can see a bunch of Ghostbusters memorabilia, and it's really neat to see. Dyker Heights is a neighborhood out in Brooklyn, pretty far out from Manhattan, that's known in particular for crazy, crazy Christmas lights every holiday season. We visited last year, took a lot of pictures. Some of the houses are crazy. Some of them are very tasteful. Some of them are very not tasteful. And, well, I guess it depends on your taste. Prospect Park is the lesser known of Olmsted and Vaux's parks, the designers who did Central Park, but it's really, really nice. Here's some pictures in the winter, but it's beautiful all year round. The boathouse is a standout sort of architectural marvel. The whole park is huge, and it's very, very cool. The Intrepid aircraft carrier you can go on, it's a museum. It's huge. It is imposing. Seeing one of these things in real life is crazy. I mean, when something's big enough to land airplanes on top of it, it's pretty big. But the museum is very, very cool, and it's a popular destination on a lot of people's lists. All right, next up is Charging Bull. This bronze statue was put up in the 80s and has come to symbolize the stock exchange, Wall Street, American capitalism, even if that wasn't quite the original intent of the artist, Arturo Di Modica. You can see the bull is a very popular spot, even the back of it. Next, we have Ellis Island, and this is one of the few spots on this list that I haven't actually been to. Maybe the only spot. So you can see that the pictures are from far away. Sorry about that. Ellis Island is, of course, famous for being the main center of immigration in the United States in the early 20th century, late 19th and early 20th centuries. Everyone coming to America passed through here. They saw the Statue of Liberty, and they went to Ellis Island. Now it's a museum and a big tourist attraction. Now we have the Apollo Theater, a hallmark of Harlem. Well known for its TV show, Showtime at the Apollo, well known for Amateur Night, well known for representing a lot of Black artists and performers who got their start here. Just a real center of the neighborhood, and a famous, famous theater, now celebrating its 90th year. Speaking of old institutions, Katz's Deli. It's been around since 1888, believe it or not, and is very famous for its enormous sandwiches. They're kind of crazy, like its famous pastrami on rye. Just still representing this old sense of the Lower East Side. It's always got a line. Of course, it's also famous for movies, such as When Harry Met Sally. Next, we have Fifth Avenue shopping. Fifth Avenue is known for its very high-end shopping. That includes, of course, the main Tiffany's store. It includes Bergdorf Goodman, that's hard to pronounce. Saks Fifth Avenue, of course, very famous. Dewar, Chanel, lots of places and high fashion brands. Just a nice place to walk around and look at window displays and probably not buy anything. Radio City Music Hall, believe it or not, is the largest indoor theater in the world. And the stage is actually 36 Rockettes across. The Rockettes are what it's famous for. They're the ones that kick. It almost closed in the 70s, but public outcry kept it alive, including from Saturday Night Live at the time. The Staten Island Ferry. I've ridden this many times. It's highly recommended for tourists because it's an excellent view of the Statue of Liberty. If you don't want to spend the time, which is like a day, to go up the Statue of Liberty, you can at least go by on the free ferry and see a wonderful view of it. Its famous orange boats are well known in lots of movies, especially the Spider-Man one where one ripped in half. That doesn't really happen in real life. The Hall of Fame for Great Americans is one of my favorite spots. It's incredible. It's this long colonnade with 100 statues of the most famous, important Americans, whether that be in medicine or politics or law or education. And they've all been sculpted by different people and voted on by this committee that votes on these sorts of things. The building is magnificent by Stanford White. It's at Bronx Community College, and it's a very, very cool space to visit. Lincoln Center is well known for a number of different institutions. I think it's home to 10 or 11 different arts institutions, ranging from opera to film, dance. Jazz at Lincoln Center is very famous. Theater, music, you name it, lots of different performing arts. You can see here a visit to it when my daughter was very young, and then another recently. We went to an event there called Big Umbrella Day that was very cool and had these people dressed up as birds for some reason. The tram to Roosevelt Island is a big tourist destination in and of itself. It's on a surprising number of people's lists. It does have a really great view of the city if you take it when it's not super crowded. Otherwise, you'll just be jam-packed in it. It's really nice to visit Roosevelt Island, walk around, especially when the cherry blossoms are out. And here we have the Dakota and the Imagine mural. The Dakota is, of course, famous for where John Lennon was killed. It was a famous building architecturally even before that. The spot is now a memorial to John Lennon in the park with this beautiful Imagine mural, and usually someone there playing the guitar and playing Beatles songs to varying levels of skill. This one is Little Italy, which is a classic landmark neighborhood in New York. It is not quite what it used to be. It was the center for Italian immigration in that whole neighborhood for decades in the early 20th century, but now has become a much smaller version of itself and much more of a touristy destination. Next on the list is MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. Just went there again recently. I remember when it was totally different, and now it's been renovated really beautifully. It's kind of like half coffee shop now. Like everywhere you look, there's just benches and places to sit around and like co-work, I guess. I don't know, it's a little odd, but their artwork is just incredible. I mean, you've got Starry Night, you've got Demoiselle d'Avignon, you've got Klimt and Seurat and all the Cezanne and all these modern masters. Here's Broadway Boogie Woogie, just a number of wonderful things. The South Street Seaport is a beautiful place to go. It's sort of an area of the city that's been preserved in a kind of 18th century way with this old-timey, authentic 19th century sailing ship, a wonderful print shop where you can see old printing presses, these great brick streets, a really nice bookstore, restaurants, all sorts of things. Greenwich Village is huge, and was debating if East Village should be separate, but let's all just group them together. West Village, Greenwich Village in general, and the East Village together is sort of nestled between downtown and midtown as a residential area of the city that's also known for its classic restaurants and bars and places to go and just these beautiful, beautiful buildings. It's just lovely neighborhoods and expensive. The Oculus is really, really cool. This is a building designed to look like a bird, and I think that is pretty accurate. You know, a weird skeleton bird, but still, it's stunning. It's an indoor mall, but as you walk in and you see this huge space unfold before you, it's just breathtaking. It looks really, really cool from the outside. It looks really cool from the inside. You should definitely check it out. Here we have the Bronx Zoo. Probably the most famous zoo in the world besides the San Diego Zoo, maybe. Obviously have lots of different animals, lots of beautiful architecture, sort of surprising, but a lot of it's really classic because the zoo's been around for like over 100 years. It's got a little bit of everything for everyone. This is one I recommend to a lot of tourists. It's the Morgan Library and Museum. It's the former home and library of J.P. Morgan, who was the world's richest man, and the library and the book collection is amazing. You can see these wall to wall books. This is every book lover's dream. It just needs more ladders. And the interior space, sort of the atrium, is really beautiful with a cafe. They have a really nice bookstore. And then they have rotating art exhibits that are really nice as well. Here's another museum on the list, very famous, the Guggenheim. To say Guggenheim, New York, because there's more than one, but this one is classic for the Frank Lloyd Wright architecture of the spiral. And on the inside, it's a spiral as well, and you walk down it to see all the artwork. They've got a great collection. Chinatown is another classic neighborhood, and one, as opposed to Little Italy, that's been getting bigger. One of my favorite spots in Chinatown is the intersection of Doyers and Pell Street, which have recently been painted and sometimes closed to traffic and just look really, really beautiful. They've also decorated a lot of the streets recently with a lot of lanterns, which is very, very cool. And the whole neighborhood just has a vibrancy and just excitement about it that is really cool to see. One World Trade is the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere at a symbolic 1,776 feet tall. It is enormous. I've only gone to the top once and it ended up being cloudy, so I don't have any photos from the top, unfortunately, but it is one of the classic, really tall buildings you can go up in New York. We mentioned the Dumbo neighborhood already, and I purposely excluded this into its own spot. This is the Instagram spot on Washington Street. I mean, that's basically what it is. You get hordes of people taking a photo here because it's a classic shot where you see the Manhattan Bridge, not the Brooklyn Bridge, very large in between these buildings. And if you look, you can see the Empire State Building perfectly line up underneath it. So it's a very popular tourist spot to take photos. Harlem is another vibrant neighborhood. I got a historic walking tour there, and it was amazing and fascinating to learn about the history. Strivers Row is very famous. Of course, you have the restaurants, delicious stuff. I was there last week and had chicken and waffles that were incredible. Lots of street art, lots of historic and cultural sites of significance, and just really impressive place to walk around and soak in the history. Block Beautiful, yes, that's really what it's called, is 19th Street between 3rd and Irving, and just has this fascinating array of gorgeous architecture. This architect in the early 20th century decided to revamp and renovate a lot of these buildings, and it's become home to different artists and people in the arts over the years and became known as Block Beautiful. You shouldn't miss it. Bryant Park is one of my favorite parks in the city, and it's very, very active in terms of having lots of activities that they set up, lots of things you can do. Here you can see juggling, for example. They have a carousel, they have movies, all sorts of things, ice skating in the winter. It's just a very cool, picturesque, scenic place to walk around. The Brooklyn Promenade, or Promenade, is a place I take a lot of visitors as well. It's a real surprise. And in fact, as you approach it, I have people sort of look down at the ground so they don't see it and then walk up to the edge and then open their eyes and be completely surprised at the vista of the whole city skyline before them. It's a really cool spot in Brooklyn Heights. Definitely check it out. It's got the best views of Lower Manhattan. The Unisphere is actually the largest representation of the Earth on the Earth. I think it's 1/6 the size of the Statue of Liberty. It's enormous. It's definitely worth checking out. It's in Flushing Meadows Corona Park in Queens, site of the former 1964 World's Fair. This was the centerpiece of the fair, and it's still there, and it has beautiful fountains. It is a very, very cool spot that you should definitely check out. Macy's on 34th Street claims to be the world's largest store. I've been in it. It's pretty large. Could be larger, I guess, but if you need to see Christmas window decorations, if you need to get sprayed by perfume, it's the place to go. My family and I went to Coney Island just 2 weeks ago, and it's a lot of fun. I grew up in New Jersey by the Jersey Shore with a lot of boardwalk games and rides and things, and Coney Island is, of course, the archetypical place for that. You can enjoy the beach, you can enjoy the boardwalk, the games, the rides. It's just a fun summer place to go. This is an interesting one. It's the New York subway system and all of the art within it. This isn't a single spot that's a landmark, but it's a core part of New York and a place that some tourists really want to visit. But as you explore the subway system, you'll find thousands of pieces of beautiful artwork, often in tile. And it's like going into a museum that only costs a couple dollars. When I was younger, I went to several baseball games at Yankee Stadium a bunch of times. But more recently, I've been there for football games, soccer, with the New York Football Club. I have friends who are big supporters of the team, and I dressed up like this for them. But it's a lot of fun, and I found it personally more enjoyable than the baseball. But to each their own. The United Nations, classic building, classic architecture. You can see it beautifully from the bridge in Tudor City. You can see it wonderfully from Roosevelt Island. It has, of course, all the flags outside, which often aren't there, but sometimes they are. It's just so interesting to have such an important site in the city, important to the entire world culture. The Chrysler Building, one of the classic buildings of the New York skyline, was once the tallest building in the world, just so iconic and easy to recognize and viewable from many different spots in the city. Just a remarkable piece of Art Deco architecture. Washington Square Park is another favorite park of mine. It's been in countless TV shows and movies, especially the center fountain and the arch. The arch is based off the Arc de Triomphe, of course, but is an honor to George Washington. The park has a lot of events and fairs and people playing music and selling poems and playing jazz and just all sorts of fun. Here we have the Stonewall Inn, which, if you're not familiar, is a famous spot because of its significance in the history of gay rights. It was the site of a riot in June of 1969 in which the gay rights community rose up against oppression at the time and sort of kicked off the entire movement. And it remains a significant landmark in the movement. They recently, like very recently, as of this recording, I haven't been there yet, opened part of it as a visitor center and little museum. But it's got a beautiful park outside as well, and during June it is very rainbow. I love the High Line. I used to work in this very beautiful but impractical building and walk along the High Line to get there back when it had just opened, and it was empty. Now it's not empty. It is pretty crowded, but it is still very, very cool, and it is also hemmed in by a lot of very large buildings, but even those are pretty cool to look at, some of them. But the High Line's an elevated former railway that is now a park and is just really nice to walk along and should definitely be experienced if you're in New York. Wall Street, infamous location known for the New York Stock Exchange, of course, which looks very impressive during the day, and at night looks like a crazy 1930s German expressionist movie supervillain lair. But Wall Street's a nice touristy spot to visit and to get a look at such an important site. The Flatiron Building is one of my favorite buildings in the city, and a lot of people's favorite. It's just beautiful to look at. The rounded front, the prow in the front, the shape of it, the amount of architectural detail is just beautiful. It's famous for being one of the first skyscrapers. It was originally known as the Fuller Building, and it's just a really beautiful building to see. This is the main branch of the New York Public Library. The two lions outside, Patience and Fortitude, are really impressive. The rooms inside the library are gorgeous to just go and read or study. Part of the library acts as a sort of museum. They have exhibits. And then there's the famous Rose Room, which you'll recall from Ghostbusters and is just stunning. I personally also like Library Way. If you visit the street, 41st Street leading up to the library, is covered in little plaques with famous quotes from books, which is very cool to walk along. Here we have the Natural History Museum, really famous spot known for a night at the museum. And here's my daughter with one of its most famous residents, the giant whale, but also known for the planetarium, for the space component in particular, but has a lot of cultural, ecological, environmental, biological history, and an amazing amount of detail. My daughter's favorite spot was the Room of Rocks, which is not my favorite, but again, to each their own. Okay, now we've made it into the top 10. At this point, these are the things that you think of when you think of New York. They are the standouts. For number 10, we've got here Broadway shows. So, Broadway, of course, runs the length of Manhattan, but is known for the stretch of the theater district where shows are performed. Here's my sister and I seeing Wicked many years ago, and here's my wife when we went to see Hamilton. We caught the end of the original cast run, which was amazing. Number 9 is the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. There's not much I can say about this. You should visit it. It's a very moving experience. When I take tourists here, if I know I'm going to be coming here, I sometimes bring one of those small packs of tissues because it's a very emotional experience for some people, and that's handy to have on hand. Next, we have Rockefeller Center. What an amazing spot, known for the Christmas tree, of course, and if you try to get there to see the Christmas tree, it's kind of crazy. And during the winter, also known for the ice skating. The statue in the middle is amazing, the flags, the shopping around. There's wonderful Art Deco artistic details throughout several blocks that constitute Rockefeller Center. 3 international buildings representing different countries. The gardens, which are known as the English Channel. Just an incredible cultural spot to walk around and enjoy. The Metropolitan Museum of Art is one of the most prestigious and important museums in the world and is just incredible. I lead an art group and I've been to the museum hundreds of times and know all of the rooms, and they're all remarkable, ranging from giant Egyptian temples to a Chinese rock garden to medieval art to 19th century art. The museum just has it all. Number 6 is Grand Central, another can't miss site. It's just blows your mind away if you've never been in there and you walk in the front door and walk down. There's a huge American flag, and then the ceiling just bursts out. It's got constellations on the ceiling. It's just this enormous space. It's hard to believe it was almost torn down, and luckily its preservation kicked off the historic preservation movement in the city. This picture was taken during the pandemic, and it really compares starkly to a normal day at Grand Central. Here we have the Brooklyn Bridge, easily one of the most famous bridges in the world, a stunning architectural marvel. There's a great book called The Bridge that tells its history that I highly recommend. When it opened, people were scared of it, so to prove that it was sturdy, P.T. Barnum, of the circus, marched 21 elephants across it to show that it could support the weight. It's just beautiful, and it's a beautiful experience to walk across. If you walk across it, walk from Brooklyn to Manhattan so that you're facing the city and walking towards the skyscrapers of the city. Here we have the Statue of Liberty. And if this list was purely ranked by most recognizable landmarks or most recognizable icons, I'm sure this would be at the top. It's recognizable around the world, of course, and symbolizes New York and symbolizes the whole country. Again, a great view of it is on the Staten Island Ferry. That's how these pictures were taken. I haven't been there actually walking up it since I was a kid, but it's an incredible experience and highly recommended. Number 3 is Times Square. As much as any New Yorker hates to admit it because it's not a pleasant place to visit if you live here, we all try to avoid it, but it is definitely something you should see in your life at least once. It blows your mind away and is this crazy, crazy world, especially at night. Here's a photo I took from the Empire State Building looking down on it. You can see all the lights from Times Square. And it's a crazy, really cool spot. Number 2 is the incredible Empire State Building. I read an article that ranked this as the top landmark as voted in the country, which is remarkable. It's an incredible masterpiece of engineering and was built in an incredibly quick time period and just stands out, can be seen around the city. These views are from our apartment window, including through binoculars, which is very cool. it's a great one to go to the top of and get some views of the city. And number one is Central Park. Central Park just can't be beat. I debated breaking apart its landmarks into their own items on this list and decided not to. There's just too many, it would skew the list. There's the Alice in Wonderland statue, the Conservatory Water with the little sailboats on it, the Conservatory Gardens, Belvedere Castle, of course, Bethesda Terrace and Bethesda Fountain, the Ramble, the Bow Bridge, the Mall, which is the most filmed spot in the world. All of it was man-made and designed to wow you as you walk through it. It's, I think, the world's best work of art, and it really epitomizes New York. It is free and open to the vast diversity of the city. It is a wonderful experience to walk around and enjoy the combination of the nature and the architecture. It's just stunning and is really the standout of the entire city. And that's it. How did you like the list? I'd love to see people quibble in the comments about the order of items. If you like this, please subscribe, give it a like, and I'll make more. And please visit New York and visit some of these sites and let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching.